I think the A player in my mind is always somebody who understands the why just as much as they do the how. My name's Craig, got into sales, joined as a direct contributor right out of college, a little tech startup. We ended up growing that over 7 years.
Nice.
And kind of at the end of that, I realized that my interests were more on the business side of thing and driving scales, and my ability to help reps out was more through strategy and process, and so I felt like I was getting a bigger contribution driving those things for the business, and just made the leap into sales ops, ran a few BDR teams, and and now I'm running a sales operations department for Mersive.
Fantastic. And what would you say you enjoy the most about this kind of the sales op role?
Yeah, for me, it's the strategy. I think, there's a bit of kind of magic behind the curtain. I can listen to reps, kind of see how they're performing, listen to what's frustrating them. In sales ops, you're kind of the hub between all departments, whether it's marketing, product, finance. And so you can easily identify pitch points and put new process in place to kind of make their lives easier. So, I get to be the helping hand to make their days easier. Sometimes it's, death by 1,000 paper cuts, but I think it's a good time.
Okay, awesome. So on that, if we get into the kind of the questions that we discussed previously, what's the groundwork required to guarantee the successful adoption of new processes?
Yeah, I'm not sure there are any guarantees in this space, but the most success I've had in designing processes is coming from the point of view of the end user versus like system architecture. So I think it's important to understand the business requirements, what the business is looking to get out of it. Sales operations touches a lot of data. So, it's important that we make sure that those requirements are realistic and there's a path to success. And then, I want to start with how that end user is going to interact with the process to drive, success of those business requirements. And, take that approach over, the great admins out there that kind of lead with the system architecture first, and kind of build a process the way it was intended by the CRM. I think you run into a point of diminishing returns if you're too heavy on the system side and kind of sticking to the best practices versus drawing that reality from the field and adjusting it to fit the way that the business works, that the end users use it.
Awesome. That was very insightful. And kind of another question would be, how do we get key influencers or champions involved in process change, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously you want your A players involved in it. I kind of look at it, I want to involve them in the requirements gathering and the process planning, kind of take the, here's what's coming down the pipe. This is what the executive team or the board is expecting. This is why this is being put in place. And this is now your time to kind of influence either the output or the process itself. Get their feedback, make them feel heard. And actually leverage that feedback to develop a system or a process that they're going to use. And then, in some cases, I want to take a look and trim the fat elsewhere. Maybe it's, do a little bartering and kill an antiquated process or metric that, may no longer be top priority, and kind of do a give and take. So it's less of sales ops or the business just forcing more stuff down, upon them, and more of a give and take, and just to kind of get them involved. I think you get the most genuine results going down that path.
Yeah, I guess there's kind of like this, it's a kind of good question, but at the same time, it's like, if reps can see that this will help them and ultimately help the company, like that hopefully drives good adoption, right? Then reps can kind of see that and be like, okay, this is going to help me and the company, and that's that.
Yeah, and there's, you've always got your pocket of reps that care about that, and your reps that don't give a shit, right? Like they just want to go there and make their paycheck. So,
yes,
zeroing in on the people that, do care about the business and leveraging that feedback, I think gives you the best
result. Awesome. So onto adoption. What's the key enablement considerations for successful long-term adoption? Like, is there a cadence or?
Yeah, I think it's important to do, a launch and then back it with training. Jumping right into a training kind of feels forced. Not everybody loves forced training and you get limited participation. So I like to do a launch. Again, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's why it's important. And I just let it sit. Most people 3 days after a launch are only going to retain 20 to 30% of what you told them. So I let it sit, go back in with the first training. And anything you can do just to give them cycles with the new process in between a trading cadence is going to help you out. So if it's a process that they're going to interact with on a daily basis, you probably only need a couple of trainings and you keep them kind of close together. If it's something they do once a month, that's a hard process to get anybody to adopt, right? So you're going to want to figure those trainings out over time, and then document the process so all the expectations are there in a document that you can forward out or point people to as they come in with questions. And then, you kind of need this visibility layer for adoption. So reports, dashboards that show people interacting with that process, create a scoreboard, if your team likes that kind of stuff and is motivated by that, and just have some fun with it. And, I think it's also important to manage kind of the process and the expectations up as well. So if the process isn't being adopted, that bad news needs to travel upstream faster than any good news that you've got related to it. And so you can take that time to reevaluate, the ask, or take a look at the process, talk about why it's failing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's interesting that you said a scoreboard. So if you could elaborate on that, have you ever kind of used that sort of way to get reps on board, or?
Yeah, I haven't gone too heavy into it. It's usually just a subscribed report that's got some level of management or executive, visibility, because, reps don't ever want to be last when it comes to being put against their peers.
Yeah.
So, and, I usually put it out there to have fun with it. It's not supposed to be, a discipline type of deal. But you get a little pickup if people know others are watching.
Yeah, it's a good way. I mean, reps are super competitive, right? So it's a good way of doing it. So on to kind of tech, what part does tech play in successful process change and adoption?
Yeah, I think it depends by process, obviously, but we pay a lot for these systems. So it should always be driving some level of efficiency or removing pinch points from a process or removing a manual process. If you just think about predictive analytics, right? You want to get to a point where the algorithms are crunching numbers behind the scenes and delivering insights while you're sleeping versus the old exercise of exporting everything to Excel and trying to use formulas to manipulate, right? The system should be doing that level of work for you. And I think the danger here is that these systems actually, are designed to deliver at scale, which means that they're also going to deliver dysfunction at scale, right? So if you rush a process or deliver something that's half-baked, you're going to do more damage than good, and you're also going to lose some street cred on future process adoption. So it kind of goes right back into that requirements gathering, making sure you're asking for the right stuff, involving the right people, and testing. Test it before you launch it to make sure you're going to get the result. But it all comes together. Awesome.
And how does data capture come into this? Like, what evidence do you surface to convince people adoption will help them?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been keep it simple. You can over-engineer these things as much as you want. You're just going to lose your audience. So you've got, and I think you do have two audiences, right? You've got the metrics or the information that the end users are going to care about, like how does it help them sell more? How does it make their life easier? And then you've got the upstream metrics that executives, the board, they're going to care about. And, oftentimes nobody cares about the sausage or how it's made. Just give them their specific plate of sausage and carry on, and don't be pedantic about it, right? Like, keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think simplicity is key in all walks of life, and especially in this. Sure. So that's a great point. What would be one thing that you could share is really important to a successful process change that might not be so obvious?
Yeah, I think this was the most interesting question out of a lot of them, right? And I think it's certainly the one that I thought most about. And the answer I came to is, these changes, they can be subtle, they can be minor tweaks, it can produce a directionally correct answer or metric versus an exact metric. it's not always a showstopper or a game changer, right? Shavings makes the pile with this type of stuff. And sometimes it's the quiet little ninja moves behind the scenes that really make the big difference. And, I think we're always looking for those silver bullets, but, a steady pace on small little wins can hit just as hard. So, don't get lost in trying to change the world. Look for little bits and pieces. And I think you'll find that the sum of those, is going to, really create something special.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I'm pretty big on learning from failure. I think it's pretty important, and there's a lot that can be learned, right? So what was the worst rollout you had, and what did you learn from this rollout?
Yeah, this one haunts me every day. So it took me no effort to answer this. Hands down, it was a process to deliver and measure a pipeline generation quota. So, the executive team thought, oh, well, the answer to having more sales is to make sure that we're putting enough new pipelines into the opportunity. So let's give them a pipeline generation quota, and we'll manage attainment against that quota, just like we do with a sales quota. So, we're all in the room, we're going, oh yeah, that'll be a great idea. It's so easy. Let's just get more, pipeline in there. And, the issue with it obviously is that pipeline creation is such an easy metric to manage to. And if you yell at somebody long enough to create more pipeline, they're going to create more pipeline. And what you'll see is there's going to be a dip in their win ratio, right? So these things are all related. And, I think what's important here, what I learned from it, is that, if it's a shit initiative, just kill it. Like, don't try to appease people. Get in there and say hey, here's kind of what we're seeing. I think we should pull the plug on this and just move on and, lick your wounds and get on to the next one.
Yeah, super important to know when something and know that something isn't working and it's not likely to work, So I think that's important. And on to upskilling reps is actually one of my personal favorite themes. I quite enjoy this one. So firstly, what defines an A player? What primary metric is chosen? And what's the sub-metrics that are used to create a template for an A player?
Yeah, I think the A player in my mind is always somebody who understands the why just as much as they do the how. So, how am I as a rep impacting the business? Why does that matter to investors? What contributions am I making towards product improvements and marketing messaging? I think quota attainment is always going to be the primary metric because it's the one that, that jumps out on you on a spreadsheet. The sub metrics are the levers, in sales operations and enablement that we can pull to help make reps better. So how do we increase deal size, closing ratio, their ability to work more opportunities, and then how do you decrease, time to close? If you focus on those four things as the sub metrics, I think you're going to get a pretty good view into, converting B players to A players, or even just defining your benchmark A player.
Interesting. So would you kind of say that? So it's a big thing in kind of the SaaS world and tech world at the moment. Is there's so many metrics out there, right? Every day metrics being developed and things like that, and I've spoken to a lot of sales leaders who've just said we only do we only look at a handful of metrics and value a handful of metrics because there's metrics for everything, but quite a lot of them create issues that aren't solvable.
Yeah.
So are you kind of like that in a kind of a simplistic way? You look at these and when you're looking at your reps and you're having your one-to-ones or whatever, you're looking at these metrics and you kind of value these far more than other metrics that are out there.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I think I take that approach because ultimately all these have to turn into coaching conversations if you want to drive improvements, right? And, I could go get 300 metrics and maybe they're going to understand 30 of them. I'm not going to bore them with the rest, right? And you're going to have, again, that kind of messaging to the field to drive improvement, and then that messaging upstream that they're going to take, to the board to talk about future investment and whatnot. So, you kind of have two sets that you measure, but for the reps, I like to keep it simple and the stuff that, we can control and develop process for.
Awesome. So this kind of goes into our other question here. So how do you then compare a B player to an A player? How do you spot where one is stronger or weaker? Is it just on these 5 metrics, or is it another way as well?
No, I think it goes back to that why and how, right? So I'm going to look at the why factors. Do they get it and do they care? Apply some gentle coaching to see if they have a genuine interest in learning more about the business. I'll give them, a peek behind the curtain as to here's why it matters. But, some reps just don't care, and that's not necessarily bad. So, it's just more likely that they're coin operated, and I'm going to stop the business coaching and trying to grow them on that front. And I'm going to start concentrating on comp incentives, territory talk tracks, finding different, opportunities that's going to help them sell more so they can make more commission.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I thought you would have gone down a data-led approach there. But it's kind of like a human approach as well to it, right? Even though you're in the kind of sales ops, there's a human side to it, and the why and the how is just as important.
Yeah. I take it right back to coaching. You're going to have to coach these guys if you want them to get better. And I think, coaching comes down to stories and demonstrated success. And you can do analysis or paralysis by analysis, but you got to speak their language and talk about what matters.
Awesome. So how do we turn this process into something that's tangible and coachable when we're kind of turning B players into A players?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to work with smaller teams. My largest team is 25 reps and have gone down to, teams as small as 5. So I like to manage it one-on-one because, as I mentioned before, each rep is going to care about things, slightly different from the next rep. And so, you'll have the core functions, obviously, that have to be messaged across the entire team. Here's our sales process and the expectations related to that. But, if you're looking at minor improvements to help, move the needle, it has to be tailor-made by rep and be specific. So anything that comes by or comes across as like forced or unwanted, it's generally going to be a waste of time to do it in mass. So I just take the time to go one-on-one, and find the little specific markers and measures that I can tweak to drive individual performance.
Awesome. So how often do you do one-to-ones? Like I've heard of some people doing them weekly, fortnightly, or do you kind of have a process go, right, this B rep kind of needs weekly one-to-ones to get up to an A rep, but an A rep kind of needs fortnightly ones. I can rely on him or her to be consistent.
Yeah, I like to keep it the same for everybody so I can define a program. Okay. Typically, I lean on weekly one-on-ones. Sometimes I'll increase I'll mess with the frequency for, new hires or ramping reps. There's always special considerations there. Or, if you get in from if your team is in more of a maintenance mode than it is a development mode, you can go out to every other week. But for one-on-ones, I like to split it. It's, I always position it as their meeting. Obviously, I'll have some topics to bring to your meeting. But, I want those sort of self-improvement and career goal and growth opportunities to be brought to the table by them. So it's not me forcing on, here's what I think, it can make you better. And again, you're sorting out, that you'll have the reps who bring 2 or 3 things and questions and examples. And you'll have the reps, what do you want to talk about today? We just met 2 weeks ago, right? And so my time is just as valuable as your time. We'll book it for a half hour. We'll use what we need. And if it's a 5-minute meeting and I don't have anything to tell you, then it's a 5-minute meeting,
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's a good opportunity to see A reps and B reps, right? You can see people who really want to get better and kind of aware of where they've gone wrong, and people who are there just to kind of go with the flow and take it easy. So in those one-to-ones, you kind of looking at reporting, or do you use a tool for that? Do you kind of, like, when I say reporting, I mean, do you go on like Salesforce, create your report and then bring it to the meeting, or?
No, it's their meeting. They have dashboards. They know where they are for quota attainment. It's their responsibility to hit target. We're all adults here. So, they're bringing that to the table. For me, it's more about how can I help you? If there are specific issues, what happened with this deal, or last time we talked about you wanted to do more role playing, how can I help you with that, or how did it go? I try to just stick to, whatever the recurring theme is from meeting to meeting, rep to rep, versus here's a whole bunch of stuff I'm going to shove down your throat that you may or may not care about.
And on to, how do you distinguish between an individual's weaknesses and a sales team's weaknesses?
Yeah, this is a fun one too. So, for me, it's about picking KPIs to measure across the team and measure everybody the same way. And then when you're looking at that data, obviously, once you have enough data to to consider a true data set. You know, the outliers or the outlying data points should be more individual strengths and weaknesses. You know, you got to pick them apart to validate them a bit, you know, solve for territory or market factors. But then the trends across the data should be your team indicators. So if everybody is 50% behind on quota for the new product, then I have to look at me, you know, did we set the quota too high? Did we not train enough? Is the product working? You know, what's going on in there? So it's kind of, you know, individual outliers versus team trends against a common data set that you're measuring equally across everybody.
How difficult is that to do? Like, can you kind of find that out pretty quickly that it's an individual issue, or does it take some time?
I mean, it'll take, I like to give myself 3 months. So, you know, I'll do a requirements gathering exercise, typically with, you know, the executive team. How do we want to measure the team? What key things are we looking for? And then we'll all agree, hey, these are the 5 metrics that we think are, you know, contributors to that. And then you're watching them and you're making sure the playing field is even. You know, 1 or 2 data points is never a trend. So you just have to give yourself the run time to have it play out. So, you know, call it 3 months, whatever it is, depending on how often you're picking up a data point, and then start fishing from there. And it's usually out of the gate, it's here are the 3 or 4 interesting insights that I see. Here's what I think they could mean. And it's a floor discussion. You know, do we agree? Yes or no? Do we need to adjust? And you just kind of build it organically on the fly, or at least I have.
Awesome. And my final question, Craig, is what are the most effective ways of cross-pollinating skills on the sales floor that you've seen?
You know, for me, since I do come from the role of a direct contributor, you know, seven years, I think, of direct selling, it's always lead by example, get in the trenches with them. You know, if I can do it on top of my day job, you can do it as part of your job. Role play, have fun with it. You know, the more uncomfortable, the better, because I think it preps you to kind of get punched in the face and you take it live with prospects and clients, right? So,
yeah,
you know, I personally believe we never max out in our potential, and there's always room to, you know, learn new skills. There's always room for improvement. Not everybody thinks that way, and I think we have to appreciate that. And if they've made quota 3 years in a row, they don't see need to learn new things, or they don't, you know, agree with you on areas for improvement, you know, the company's going to like them just fine if they make quota a 4th year in a row, right? So, you know,
yeah,
go spend your time where it's going to matter, and the people that want you to, you know, give them coaching or share their time or use you as a sounding board, you know, just give everybody the opportunity. Thank them for their involvement. I think that's a big one, because I think, you know, oftentimes people come across it, you know, you're getting a paycheck, you got to do this, you know, commission covers you on sales, your paycheck is this and this, you know, just take time to say thank you. That's a good one. And then, yeah, I think, you know, where the level of effort and performance don't match the company goals, you got to make a change there and get the right person in the chair that can contribute to the team.